Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Adbena, and I'm the Program Manager of the Microsoft Reactor San Francisco. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you: our code of conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I'll be sharing the link in the chat for our YouTube channel, and if you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please know that you must create an account on YouTube in order to access and interact in the chat. You can set that up right now, and if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, please feel free to reach out to us through social media or Meetup. Which brings us to today's session, Building GitHub Pages. I'm going to bring our speaker for today, Sam, their original cloud advocate from Microsoft. Hello, Sam. How's it going?
Hello. Thank you so much, and welcome, everybody. I am Sam. I am a regional cloud advocate here at Microsoft. My job is to help empower all of you to build really cool things on top of Microsoft technologies. What we're looking at today is a series of, there we go. I'm sorry, my computer froze, but that's okay. So what we're looking at today is GitHub Pages. I have a series of presentations that I would like to package up into a GitHub page and then ship off so that it's more accessible and easier to use. What we're doing is working on a workshop that makes it easier to get started with using Git and GitHub if you're just learning those technologies. And so what we want something that you can fork so that you can actually use the same resources that we're trying to do yourself or learn from them. And so the idea behind all of this, the reason that we're trying to use GitHub Actions here is that you can fork this project and then your fork will be updated automatically using the same GitHub Actions that are built into this project on your fork. So your fork will stay up to date and do all the same stuff. It will build the same website with all of the slides and so forth. So that's the goal here. We're going to take a look at trying to do two, I hope. One of them is going to focus on GitHub Pages and trying to publish these resources more publicly. And the other one is going to try to add a pull request back to the project so that we can actually add additional resources that are automatically generated based off of the existing content, so that everything kind of stays in sync. I think that's sort of what we want to do. We'll figure that out. If it's not what we want, we can change that. So this is what I have so far. We're going to kind of quickly walk through this, but before I walk through what I have, let's take a look at how to get here. So if you go to any project that you have, we'll just use this one because this is the project that I'm working on. What we want to do is create a GitHub page. A GitHub page is a static website that hosts a series of pre-built HTML files that you can then serve out to people. So you can use that to either build something from Jekyll or something else, or you can do your own custom thing using GitHub Actions. That's the path that I have chosen, which means that we're going to build the website inside of GitHub Actions and publish those artifacts as our website, which means that instead of having to publish a bunch of generated HTML files into our repository and have those be source controlled and modified, we can leave all of that behind the scenes inside of our CI processes and use that instead. So all we need in our actual source code is the code that we're actually working on. So none of the generated stuff lives in here. So that's the idea. So to do this, go into the settings of your project and click on Pages, and then click the one that you want. So in this case, there's a few different sources you can use. you can use the deploy from a branch or the GitHub Actions option. And so I'm choosing this and then going with static HTML and then choosing this. And then we can just ship this off. So that's the idea. This is where I got all of the stuff that I'm using, is this template right here. So this is what we're going to do. We're building all of our content inside of Slidev, which is a node package that lets you build things from that. So if we want to do this, I can get into my presentations, which is in here, and then do a npm like intro, for example. And this should hopefully, oh, nope, that's not how that works. Very much not a JavaScript person, so still figuring all of this out. npm start run, sorry, intro, there we go. So this is going to build our project and then publish a working version of it. This is for like local use. And then this will give us the slides that we can use. And then what we want to do is actually pull all of this out and do it all in CI. So we want to automate all of this so that you don't have to do it. So this will take a little bit, I think, because it has to build things and then it's going to host a website for us. So this is the process that we're trying to kind of package up and put somewhere else. So let's take a look at this. Apologies, my computer is unfortunately not happy with me right now. That's just way these things go. But we'll let that do its thing and then work on this a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. So we have our thing. So we can just pull this up. It looks like it's doing it automatically. And then we'll get this eventually. And so this is sort of what we're aiming for. It's still loading, question mark. Yeah, there we go. So there we go. So we want to take this and package this up and then push it somewhere else. So that's the whole process that we're trying to work with this. And so the way that I kind of take these things and start working with them is GitHub Actions. So I showed how to get to the thing, and then you can copy the template and use that for whatever you're doing. So in this case, we just have all of this. I have another one for generating PDFs. This is like a work in progress. So things are different. So we'll probably be taking a look at both of these and kind of tinkering with how to work with all of this. I have two GitHub actions that I'm using for this right now. One is for deploying our presentations and one is for generating PDFs. So the idea here is we want to, in this action, we're trying to generate PDFs that will actually capture our slide content. This is intended for making those a little bit more accessible so you can just either print them off or take them with you or do whatever you want in a more mobile way. So you can actually take them with you without needing a web browser to do that. If this is a workshop or something, you may want to print those off. So this is the task that is going to do that. We need to change this because this doesn't work. But that's another thing. And this other one is going through here and building everything. So let's talk a little bit about what all of this stuff does, because there's actually quite a bit that's going on inside of this that I've already kind of done that we kind of want to work on. So we have this push. Push, if you're unfamiliar with GitHub Actions, push is the action that is triggering this. This is what causes us to run this action. There are a whole bunch of different actions that you can trigger, which let's just actions triggers. I don't remember the link for this, but there we go. Events that trigger workflows. There's a lot of these. They're listed over here. So under the available events, everything from forking to pushing like we're doing to creating a pull request or opening an issue. however you want to hook into that. There's lots of different ways that you can actually work with the stuff you're getting on GitHub. And this gives you a bunch of ways to kind of react to that. In this case, we're reacting to a push, which would mean that some new change is landing on a branch. And so in this case, we're saying whenever it lands on the main branch. So only changes to our main branch are going to trigger this job. And we also add a workflow dispatch. So what this is doing is giving us an automated way to trigger these. So a workflow dispatch doesn't actually do anything. There's no actual trigger for this. It's not going to run automatically for any reason. All this does is give you a way to go to your repository, go to actions, I think. I forget where to find this, but we can go to our thing and click this run workflow button. So you can see this workflow has a workflow dispatch event trigger. And so now we have a run workflow button. So we can manually invoke this workflow. If you don't have that workflow dispatch, this entire option will not appear. You won't see it. So that's the difference. That's what's happening there. That's why that's there, so that if we ever need to manually trigger this, we don't need to push some change that doesn't actually do anything. We can just do this and it will run. There's a bunch of other things going on here, so let's keep going. The other thing, this permissions is limiting the GitHub token that gives you access, gives your workflow access to certain things in your repository. We're limiting that so that, or giving it permissions so that it can actually write a page. And then we also are changing some of the concurrency of this job. What this is doing is giving it a name and then a cancel in progress setting. What that's going to do is say, if there's already an action with this name running, cancel that first before starting the next job. So that if you have multiple workflows queued up, it will cancel all of the ones that were already scheduled and do the newest one. This prevents like weird conflicts from happening because of that, and saves you time from wasting time because you're not deploying something that is already outdated. So that's what that's for. And then jobs is where your actions live. So this is sort of the brains of what's actually going on here and what is actually going to be run as part of this action. So everything in this job, I think, is all done inside of build. So build is our job, and that's going to go run inside of an Ubuntu runner. You can find where these are defined on GitHub, but these are the machines that you're going to run them on. You can run them on Linux, Mac, or Windows. There's caveats attached to all of those, depending on what you're doing. But depending on what you need, you can choose that. We're just using Ubuntu because that makes the most sense. And then we can choose an environment. So we're running this inside of a GitHub Pages environment. So we want to actually use our GitHub Pages environment because that's where we're deploying this to. And then just giving it the correct URL to actually go out to that. And then some normal-ish GitHub stuff. So we're checking out a repo. If you've never used GitHub Actions before, this is a really important step. When you're using GitHub Actions, your code isn't there. So you need to check it out. You need to tell it to actually go and get whatever changes you're doing. So this is actually going to go and do that smart stuff. It's going to actually go and grab the current working version of your code and make sure that's all present so that all the stuff that you're trying to do, whether it's building it or reading certain files inside of your repository or however that's working, this is going to actually make it possible to do all of that. So that's what that's doing. The next thing is setting up Node. So what this is doing is actually going out and setting up my node. We're using npm and node to run all of this stuff. So that's coming from our package.json. That's where all of this is defined. I've also added some caching. The reason for this is I don't want to keep pulling down all the new packages every single time that we need to build this. Instead, I want to just reuse what's already there. So I think I don't have a cache, but this is where the caches would appear. if you have them. This should populate as we run this. I'm not entirely sure why it's empty right now, but it is. So there's that. But this is where all of that stuff would be stored, and that gives us a way to actually reuse the packages that we're downloading between jobs instead of having to refetch them every time. Next, what else? This is just a basic run command. Run is just going to go and run a series of commands. Typically, you'd see this used for just one line. What I've done is added this bar here. Okay, it's no longer responding. That's cool. What that bar is doing, there we go. What this thing is doing is saying this is a multi-line string. GitHub actions are defined inside of YAML. So YAML syntax for a multi-line string is a bar. I think there's another way to do it, but this is what I always use. And so all this is doing is saying all the stuff that comes after this is also part of this string. And this lets us do multi-line commands without having to do weird chains like this, because this gets a little bit awkward after like two things. So instead of doing that, we can just specify each of our commands on its own separate line. And then all this is doing is going into the correct repository inside of our code. So everything is in our presentations directory. It's going and running npm CI, which is going to do a clean restore of all of our packages, and then running and building all of the stuff. And then we list that just to say it's done, configure our pages and upload the artifact, and then deploy that. And then that's how all of this works. So all of this is part of that template that I showed, and that's actually what's deploying this. So we upload an artifact, and then that goes and gets hosted for us. So let's go and use it. What we really need to work on is this. This run command doesn't actually work. This crashes. So I need to go and change this. But I think what we can do is just move these commands inside of the thing. I would like to move them into this package. So again, I am very much not a JavaScript developer. This is not what I know. So I'm still figuring it all out. But I've found that if we just put things inside of the scripts directory, certain things stop breaking. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I think there's some working directory thing going on with the package that I'm specifically using that causes weird behavior without this. So that's all I've found out. What I do know is if I do like build intro like this and paste what we have here, we'll talk about what this is in just a second. CD intro to GitHub, and then we can chain that. So the and is just a continuation. So it's going to run this and then do this. And then we need a comma. There we go. And then this is going to go and run that build command, output or look at the slides.markdown file. So all of the way this package works is you define a markdown file that has all of your slides in separate markdown pages. Markdown has a page feature if you're unfamiliar. And what that does is give you a way to actually paginate these files. The paging is just 3 dashes. You might have seen it a lot in like front matter. That's just a different way of using that, but it's just pages. And so that ends up getting used to build all the slides, which are each individual pages, and then we can just send those somewhere else. So this will go to our generated directory and then do its thing. And that should be it. So we can actually test this. One of the useful things of putting everything inside of here is that there's a really quick way to test this, hopefully. So let's go and do that. And so what we're expecting is that we can actually put things inside of this presentations list. There we go. All right. Well, that doesn't look right. There we go. That was weird. So if I run this now, what I expect is that I can put new files inside of this presentations path. So we can go and run npm run build intro. And that should go and build this and throw this into the presentations directory. And so we'll end up with a, hopefully, an intro to GitHub intro to GitHub directory that has a bunch of extra stuff inside of it. And then what we can do is just make sure that gets called from inside of our GitHub action. And that should trigger everything to go and run and do all of its stuff. So that's the idea. So now we have this index and 404 page and so forth. So we've actually gone and generated a bunch of files for us. So let's actually go and do that for real. So what's happening here is I do not want to upload this generated directory. That's not what it's for. It's just a empty directory that's going to hold a bunch of extra stuff, which I think I can actually I don't remember the syntax for this, but there's a way to do like this, I want to say. We'll see. But that should ignore every subdirectory if I remember correctly. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So what I've said is don't commit the subdirectories inside of this generated folder. So that's going to just ignore that. And then we can not add these. It's still thinking, I guess. So let's go and swap this stuff out and throw in this instead. So we can do npm run, and then our command was build intro. We can run that and see what happens. So I haven't actually done this way before, so I don't actually know how this works. But we're gonna see. So the idea here is that we can run this, build our intro, and then publish that. So let's give that a shot. So why are all of these still here? That's interesting. So we should be ignoring those files now. So they shouldn't be showing up inside of my changes. So I don't actually know what's going on there. But we're going to pretend like they're not there. And keep going. So there's that and this. And so one thing is my environment is configured so that I can only deploy from main. So this is actually why, if you look in the bottom left down here, I'm actually working on the main branch, which is a little bit weird if you're more familiar with Git. Typically you work on a working branch or something. But if I do this on any other branch, we're actually going to get an error that it's not going to work. So this is to prevent that from happening. I suppose we can demo that. So let's do that too. But let's just add build-in intro. Right. And hopefully this doesn't just explode. I guess we'll find out. So we can commit that. I just pushed it up by synchronizing, and so we should now have a running thing that's going to go and pull everything down. We don't have a cache, so this might take a little bit longer just to pull all of the dependencies down. They are somewhat large, which is why we had the cache, but This will skip all that. The long part is where it is right now inside of this run presentations, and then it's just going to go and run and do everything else. Or it already pulled in the cache. That was quick. Huh. Okay. Well, that went quick. So I think it worked. Question mark, created deployment. Okay, let's try that and see what happened. It succeeded. So I actually, this is the first time this has worked. So I don't actually know what I just did. Let's go and figure that out. Deploy. There we go. Grab this, and that's going to do that. And then we can go into intro to this work. At least we get a page. So this is progress. So it's no longer 404. The reason it 404, okay, we are still getting 404s. I don't know what this is. But the reason we were getting a 404 at the root directory is because this was in a subdirectory. We were inside of, we created a directory inside of the one we uploaded. So we're actually, this should be a header or something. And I don't have that. So this needs to still get created. We don't have a page here to surface all the sub things. But actually, we can do that. Why not? Yeah, this will be interesting. Let's go and just throw something in there. So what we're doing is we're deploying this web project, so we can actually just throw an index file in here, and this should just work. This is not probably how I'm going to do this, but this will be quick. So we're going to do it this way. And then we can change it later. So we're going to manually just real quickly write out something like this. One. Hello world. Cool. And so we can write this, save that file, hopefully. And then go and add this change to our thing. I need to, so I have set this to ignore these files in my git ignore, so that this change isn't going to get picked up at all because it shouldn't. But we can actually go and add this manually, I believe, by just going into here. So git add, and I want to do generated web index. And then I have to do a -f to force it to add this because it's part of our git ignore. And so now we should have hopefully staged that change. And I don't actually know if it's going to show up there, but it doesn't really matter because we can just do a thing from the command line to commit this. Let's go here. We have way too many lines. Git commit -m. Sorry, my console is not happy with me. It looks really weird, but we're just going to do git commit -m and then give it a message. Add index file. There we go. So the way this works, we basically just did git stuff from the command line. So git add adds a file, it stages it for committing, and then you'll see my shell extension said we had added one file, and then I committed that file. So commit -m is commit with a message. If you don't have the -m and the message, it's just going to ask you to write a file to add in your own message. Doing -m skips that step. If you're on like Bash or something, it's going to open up, I think, I don't even know, whatever your default is, probably Vim or some other similar thing. So whatever it is, you just need to write a message and then quit, and it should save that. And there we go. So hopefully we can now push this. And there we go. Okay. And that should push this, and then we'll get rid of this file. So all that was doing is just adding in an index file for this, so that we can actually replace this. Final project is probably not going to do this. This is mostly just to get around all of this for now, and then we can jump back to what we had. But it just gets rid of this 404 page, which I don't want to deal with. So there we go. We have actions. It should finish eventually. And then, yeah. So the slow part is just this, because that's when it's doing all of our stores and stuff. Do we have a cache yet? Yeah. Okay. So here's the cache that we're creating as part of this project. So you can see it's 68 megabytes and has all of our node stuff that we're restoring as part of this. And this hopefully helps speed up these builds a little bit, so that we can cache these files between each one of our runs, because they should be the same. They shouldn't be changing all that often. And so this way we can just reuse them without having to go and re-pull them every single time. So that's what that is. And this is how you kind of check what those are. If you want to get rid of these for any reason, you can just delete them. Just click the delete button, and then they're gone. But for us, that should be fine. And then we have this, and now there's our page. I don't know why we're getting. Oh, so the 404 is for our favicon, which we don't have. So there's our basic page. So we just deploy this random index file. But yeah, we can just add anything into that web directory now, generated or not, and it will get deployed as part of this. So that gives us a way to kind of quickly iterate on those things. Continuing along that path, what I'd like to do now is look at how we can do PDF renders. So as part of this, one of the things that I like to do is generate content based around this, sort of trigger jobs that kind of synchronize with data somewhere in the system in order to resolve what's going on. So I've been kind of tinkering with this file. Let's look at the nicer version. There we go. So this is doing a lot of the same stuff with slight modifications that I've made. So what this does is generate presentations of PDFs as things are made, and then it's going to open a pull request against the project. That's how this works. So we have a main branch, and then what this is doing is different than what was in the previous one. It's still triggering on pushes to main, but only if there's changes to our presentation's path. So only if there's changes inside of that directory are we going to actually trigger any extra work. And so all that's going to do then is just go and run through and trigger the job. We have a similar concurrency thing so that we can cancel things. And then what's going on here? We check out again, and then I don't think any of this works. So that's that. So I think what we can do is copy most of this. So check out, we set up, and then we run like this. So I think I can do that. I think it's going to use a different cache as part of this. So the caching aspect of GitHub Actions is something that I am less familiar with. It's something that I use, but more incidentally than across an entire project. So I don't know the specifics of how this works. We're going to find out real quick, because we're going to end up with two files if we're recreating our cache. And then I'll have to figure out what's going on. Or it might reuse the existing one. I don't know. That's something that you can find in the docs. I just don't know right now. So where we're using that, we'll see what happens. And then what we're doing here is the same thing. So we want to go into our presentations directory and then do a npm CI. This is, I always forget the name of the commands. npm load? That doesn't sound right. Install, npm install is going to go and grab all your packages. npm CI does a very similar thing, but it's going to do that for more of a clean installation. And then here, we're just copied that. So I have done more. This isn't going to work. So we need to kind of resolve some of this and do some of this other stuff. What's going on here is a generation step. This is what happens when I'm thinking about projects and don't actually think about how it's actually going to work. So I separated out. I mentioned when we were kind of looking at this that you can have multiple jobs as part of your GitHub action. This does have multiple jobs. By default, they will all run concurrently. That's not what we want. We don't want all of our jobs to run concurrently. We want them to have dependencies. We want to do this, and then this, and then this, and so forth. So in order to define that, you have a needs that you would say. So this needs our setup in order to run. And then it runs on Ubuntu latest and does all of the same things. So all the same setup is there. This one has a matrix. What a matrix is it's defined inside of the strategy .matrix, and then you give it a name. In this case, we have presentations, which means that further down inside of this, I can access this by going matrix.presentations or whatever name you gave it. And then this will run the job once per item in your matrix. It does a cross product between all of these. So what that means is if I go and do versions, something like this, we could have like version 1 and version 2. This is just an example. Again, this is a cross product. So the important thing here is this is going to run 6 builds if you just ran this, because it's going to run 1 with intro to GitHub, 1 with get signed up with GitHub, 2 with the intro to GitHub, and so forth. So all of those will run concurrently at the same time. A lot of the time that isn't necessarily what you want. You might want some other collection of those, so you'll have to think about this a little bit differently. But that's how that behavior goes. So just keep that in mind. If you start adding lots of things here and then add something else, you're going to compound quite a bit. And again, we want to wait for this to finish. So then we're going to do generate. So the intent behind this, the reason that I did this way, is that we could build every project simultaneously because they don't have dependencies on each other. Just the setup and then the publish has dependencies. But these don't persist between one another. So it's going to run one and then run a separate thing in its own isolated instance, which means that you can't do this. I don't think there's a way to make this work. At least not that I'm aware of. There might be a way. I just don't know it. So this doesn't work the way that it's written. So we need to actually rethink this. So what ends up needing to happen is we want to build one of the things, just like we have in this presentations where we go here and say, build the intro. We need to do that here. We need to run this and say, build PDF, whatever it is. And then that's going to go and run and return some results. And then we need to go and run this other thing. So the way I have this set up is there's 3 jobs. This one's going to go and generate everything. And then the other thing is going to wait for all 3 of those to finish because we have one of these needs parameters. So that's going to say it needs this to finish. So that's going to wait for all 3 to complete. And then it's going to go and run this, which is another thing that goes and creates a pull request against your repository. So this is a third-party GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is a open source thing. So you can add and create your own custom actions. You don't just have to use your own or define them using run. You can use other things defined either in a Docker container or through TypeScript. So you can define your own things. This one opens up a pull request. So if you're curious how I found that, the name of this task is the GitHub username and the thing. So this is something that I've used in some of my other projects as a way to do this. And what this does is just open up a pull request against your repository from a bot account. So a bot will create, in this case, the author is defined right here. And then that will go and create a pull request with the changes that you have. So I use this as a way to automate things like blog posts and things on my own site, generated from content from other places. And then that way it just automatically adds and generates the files that are needed to publish whatever that is. This gives a nice way to kind of remove some of those other things. If you're going to automate it anyway, this gives you a way to kind of do that and then submit a pull request to ask to merge that in. You could just, for example, automatically merge and push things to main. I prefer the pull request route. This gives us a way to kind of review things and make sure everything makes sense and is good, and kind of make sure everything's on track. As part of this, we talked a little bit about the security tokens when we were walking through this. So inside of the deploy presentations bit, I had looked at this as a way to set permissions for what we're actually doing. This is how we're changing what this GitHub token is actually able to do. So if you don't want it to go and write code to wherever or open pull requests or whatever, you can limit or change what that is. But I use this as a tool to kind of do these things. And then this way we can just have files that are added to the repository that represent certain things. There's other ways to do this. For example, we could publish a new release as part of this. Maybe add artifacts or however we want to do this. For this, I just thought this would make sense. So that's what I've been doing. So let's go and change this. So I already have the command that I need to run here. So we're going to go and do that now. So for this, I need to go into our presentations. There we go. Package. And then call this PDF intro. And then go and create this. And we're going to throw everything into the same directory. Except I need this like that. There we go. So we're going to export this to our current position, and then this needs to go, instead of into the web directory, I want this to go into the presentations directory. And then yeah, I think that makes sense. This isn't going to work because I have it set to ignore all of that. So we will have to change our git ignore, just our web directory, and leave everything else. But then this way, our presentations directory should exist and should work. But we're going to ignore everything else. So this will allow us to actually generate something into that directory and then work from it. And then, yeah. So I should talk a little bit about why we're doing this. basically we want a PDF version of the slides that we're generating. We could just say before you check in as part of your check-in request, as part of your pull request, make sure you do these steps to generate this. But at least in my experience, that's something that quickly gets forgotten or missed for some reason, and then things get out of sync. Whenever there's a manual, make sure you do this whenever this happens. I've found that automating that and doing something to kind of hook into that can prevent that from getting out of date. If you've ever run into an issue where something is supposed to be happening and it isn't anymore for some reason, that can be sort of gotten around by doing this and having automated process to work that. That's why I like doing this kind of thing. It prevents some issues, not all of them. So that's that. And so I should be able to npm run our PDF intro, and that should run the new command that I just created, the new script. And then hopefully we will end up with a presentations thing. Or it will not. Okay. What it's asking to do is to, the way this works is it renders from Playwright. We've talked about Playwright in another version of this a month or so ago. Playwright is a tool for automating web testing. That it can do lots of cool dev testing. This is used to render out the pages. I am not familiar with this tool to the point where I know how it actually works. But this is a dependency, and so it seems to be rendering web pages and then rendering this out. And then what I'm curious is, did that add an actual dependency here? Yeah, dev dependencies. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So a dev dependency, I shouldn't guess too much, but these are not included in your actual ship project. Should that be added to the packages.json? I think so. So we really need everything to be added to our packages.json because this is what we're restoring from. Our project is being built. We're eventually going to build this from here. And so the setup process is run npm install. And then you should have all the tools you need. If you don't, then something else needs to happen. So hopefully this gets us all the stuff that we actually need to run this, to actually be able to build what we're trying to do. Then I think I can delete all of this. So we're just going to do that and hope I'm right. And then we can do a PDF intro. And this should include our presentations. These ls commands are just there so that we can validate that the files exist. I'm doing this. We should have a pull request that automatically has all these things. But if we don't, the ls command is there as a debugging tool for me, so I can tell what's happening, and then we'll just remove that before I submit this as a final change. Again, this is only in my fork. So all of this stuff that we're doing should only target my fork. And if it doesn't, oops. So that's what this is for. One note here. Right now, I am using this version. So this is Peter Evans / create pull request at v3. I don't usually recommend doing this. So what we might want to do instead is fork this. So we can actually go here and fork this into our own repository. There's a few reasons for doing this. One, it means that you will always have a copy of it. So if something were to happen to the initial project, something happens, it's still there. And 2, you can control the updates to that project. So this shouldn't be a common issue, but if you're pulling from a third party, like that would be, what this is doing is saying grab at v3. So whatever version 3 is, whatever the label for version 3 is, go and grab that. You're not supposed to rewrite history in Git, but you can rewrite history in Git. If you've ever done a rebase, you've rewritten history in Git. The thing with that is that you can do that with this too. So it's possible for somebody to go in and potentially rewrite that. That probably isn't a thing. Probably isn't going to happen, but it might happen. And so I like to either use my own thing, or the other alternative is to pin it directly to a commit. And you can pin, instead of to a version, you can pin it to the git SHA. So I can show you how to do that too. There. So this should use the same thing, and then we'll get all of the same stuff. And then exactly. Good call out. That's been a few years now since LeftPad happened. But same idea. Is ideally you want to control your dependencies, and not create unnecessary supply chain issues later on for whatever is happening. A lot of times these CI processes can live for years, and a lot of the times it's possible for a CI process to get created and then stick around and just be like maintained for years and years and years. And if that happens, it's likely that the people who wrote it, that would be you, don't know how to restore it whenever that happens, or maybe you aren't even there anymore. And so to prevent like weird things from happening, having some verification to get back to that can be useful. So that's what that is. That's why I did that. It should work, I think. And then if you want to pin it to a SHA, you can just grab them from here. So you can just click one of these commit details, and I think actually GitHub gives you a copy full SHA button. So on this page, there's a copy button here. And so you would just copy that and replace the v3 with the name of the SHA. And you can get this from your releases too, which if you're using labels, you'll want to use that instead. And then you can just like leave a comment, which I forget how to do in YAML. It's not /. Oh, it's a hash. There we go. So this would be like at v3 or something. So it's some way for you to say, this is actually in version 3. Here's the SHA. And then what this is doing is just making sure that like it's harder for it to be rewritten. Because if somebody goes back and reverts and re-tags something, maybe changes version 3 to target a different version, does like a quick fix in place, for whatever reason, it prevents you from pulling in that change. And you'll have to do that all manually. So that's how that's working. If you don't have this, it's just going to pull the latest, which might be okay for working just as like tinkering. I would recommend something else, probably using dependencies that you actually own for something you're trying to ship. That's that. Also, this is not an area that I am necessarily an expert on. So there's definitely probably other options there for you. But this is just how I've approached this particular problem. So there we go. I think that covers everything. So what have I done? We have npm run pdf intro. So if I run this, I think, well, we're not going to see anything here because this is local. But if this works, what we should see is now we should have something inside of this presentations directory. This might take a little bit to generate because it's actually, I think, generating the website and then generating the PDF from that. So it uses a deploy key to commit the generated presentation. I don't know. So this isn't, in this case, we're not deploying anything. If you're talking about the GitHub Actions, it's using an artifact. So a GitHub artifact that is using this custom job in order to do that. And then what's happening here, this token, is giving permission to access the repository to this thing. Oh no. This is what happens when I do things that I don't actually know if they work. What broke? We exceeded a timeout, a 30-second timeout. Cool. Let's try that again. See if that changes anything. If it does keep timing out, we'll figure it out some other time. But this is sort of how I've done this. And what this does is it should open up a new pull request with the new changes. So what this specific issue does, or action does, there we go, perfect. So where did I send that? Because it's not where I thought it would be. That's not good. Okay. That's. Oh. I'm not going up enough directories. Either way, we're generating our PDF. We're almost out of time, so I'm just going to commit this. This isn't working quite how I need it to, but it's Git, and this is a fork of the one that I'm actually working on, so I can actually go and clean this up later. So we're just going to do this, and hopefully this will get us something that actually opens up a pull request somewhere in our project, and then we should be good. So let's do this. Let's do write PDFs. Put that. And then we'll push that. And then just to kind of talk a little bit more about like some of the things that I use things like this for in my own project. Here. Nope. What have I done? We will go and find it. There we go. So in my own project, what I do is I actually use a very similar thing. It's currently broken because I had a job runner fail, but that's a separate thing. And so what it does is it does the same thing. It goes and generates actions. This is the actual implementation because I have a custom action for this. But inside of this, it's actually going into the workflows and then going and generating the things. In this case, it's actually taking YouTube videos and turning them into blog posts and then opening up a pull request with the generated articles based off of the YouTube videos. So that's how that's working, but it's doing a lot of the same stuff. And in this case, I'm actually assigning myself as a reviewer, so I can actually test those out and see what the website would look like with those new generated changes before anything happens. And this gives me a really nice workflow, and it automatically does a lot of the stuff that I would need to do. And then this is just assigned to a cron job instead of pushing, for example, because it's tied to an external service. You can also tie into webhooks if you have those. But in this case, I didn't. So it's just attached to a daily cron job that runs at, I think, midnight Pacific, if I'm remembering my timing correctly. It changes because, yeah, anyway. But that's how I ended up using this. So let's go and look at this. Generate PDFs. Do we have a pull request? Nope. What happened? It completed successfully, so I don't exactly know. But I might have missed something. either way, I am unfortunately out of time. So I will have to end it here, but thank you so much for, yeah, so GitHub Actions can run on a schedule. I can actually get you this. Let's see here, schedule. Here you go. So this link will get you to a list of GitHub Actions that you can run. I linked directly to the scheduled one. So you can use that to schedule a cron job for your actions, and then use that to kind of kick things off, however it works. It is on UTC time. I think that's called out here. That's why it was 08. So it's actually running at midnight for me. But keep in mind, all the times are UTC based. So that's how that works. And then you can do whatever you want. There's a bunch of other ways to kick things off too, depending on what you're interested in. So that's that. This one was really handy because cron jobs are actually kind of useful for for lots of things. So that's how I ended up using it. But yeah, hopefully this is helpful, and thank you all for watching. We do this every week on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific. So please join again if you're interested. We also have a survey on the screen. This is how I know if I'm doing a good job, or if you want us to change something, that's where you can let us know. We are already planning a few changes for this going into the new year that I'm really excited for. So if you like project-based stuff, we're going to be hopefully doing a little bit more of that moving forward. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.